Imagine stumbling upon an ancient forest where each tree seems to whisper dark secrets and every shadow hides an indescribable danger. Think of the feeling of being drawn into this place, only to discover that dark forces await those who dare to venture into its depths. Today we will dive into a macabre horror story where the unknown not only haunts but devours. Have you ever wondered what truly lurks in the darkness? Prepare yourself for a journey into the deepest fear. Ethan was a writer struggling with a creative block that seemed insurmountable. Hoping to find inspiration, he accepted an invitation from Lucas, an old childhood friend, to camp in an isolated forest. Lucas always described the forest as a place of beauty and mystery, but there was something in his voice that denoted caution, as if the trees held secrets that should not be revealed. Upon arrival, Ethan noticed something strange about Lucas, a tension in his shoulders and a distant look, as if he was carrying an invisible burden. The campsite was set up in a clearing surrounded by towering trees whose canopies blocked most of the sunlight. The tents, solitary in the vastness of the forest, seemed small against the majesty and mystery of the surroundings. During dinner, by the light of a campfire casting dancing shadows on the trees, Lucas mentioned stories about ancient inhabitants of the forest who performed rituals to appease dark entities. They say some people who entered the forest were never seen again, he murmured, more to himself than to Ethan. Intrigued and a bit skeptical, Ethan decided to explore the forest the next day, believing he might find the spark of creativity he so desperately sought. Night fell heavily, and as Ethan lay in his tent, the distant sound of a wolf howling pierced the silence, causing a feeling of unease to settle in his heart. The darkness seemed to have a physical presence, enveloping the camp and its inhabitants in a suffocating embrace. Have you ever felt like a place was trying to warn you about something? Ethan thought before finally succumbing to sleep. His hopes and fears intertwined in his dreams. The next morning, the sky was covered with dense clouds, and the air was heavy, carrying the scent of damp leaves and something more metallic, almost like iron. Ethan, determined to explore, followed a path that wound between the trees, whose leaves rustled softly in the wind as if whispering ancient secrets. As he walked, he felt an unsettling sensation of being watched, but dismissed it as a product of his imagination and the eerie atmosphere of the place. After some time, something caught his attention, an almost invisible trail covered with fallen leaves and moss that branched off from the main path. The forest around seemed to whisper, encouraging Ethan to move forward. The clearing he found was surrounded by ancient stones covered with macabre symbols that seemed to pulse with energy of their own. Upon touching one of the stones, a vision hit him forcefully. A woman in rags, her eyes vacant, whispering words in an unknown language while performing a sinister ritual involving a glistening knife and a crackling fire. The vision was so vivid that Ethan staggered back, feeling his heart race and cold sweat trickle down his neck. When he returned to the camp and told Lucas about the clearing, he turned pale, his eyes wide with fear. Lucas revealed that the forest was a place where sacrificial rituals were performed to appease dark entities that dwelled among the trees. "It's a profane place," Lucas said, his voice trembling. "The veil between our world and theirs is thin here." Despite the growing fear, Ethan felt compelled to return to the clearing, drawn by an inexplicable force that seemed to call his name, whispering promises of ancient revelations and hidden power. And you? Have you ever been drawn to something you knew was dangerous? Share in the comments. That night, Ethan was jolted from sleep by a disturbing sound, a chorus of wails that seemed to emanate from the forest itself. The wind howled through the trees, carrying voices that seemed to plead for release. Stepping out of the tent, he saw in the distance, through the shadows, hooded figures around the stones performing a horrific ritual. The shadows of the trees danced to the sound of macabre chants, and the air was thick with the smell of iron and sulfur that made his skin crawl. Ethan, paralyzed with fear, watched as a central figure, possibly the same woman from the vision, raised a bloodied knife, offering it to the sky as if in supplication. Lucas, noticing Ethan's unease, pulled him back to the safety of the camp. "They know you're here," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling with dread. "And they want you to join them. They're always looking for new souls to strengthen their ties with the beyond. What would you do if you saw something so horrible?" Share your experience with us. Feeling helpless, Ethan spent the rest of the night on watch, listening to the disturbing sounds of the forest that seemed to echo within his own mind. The figures dancing in the clearing seemed to cast shadows that stretched towards him, trying to pull him into the darkness. As the night wore on, Ethan began to question his sanity, wondering if it was all just a feverish nightmare induced by isolation and Lucas's stories. Unable to resist the dark call echoing in his mind, Ethan decided to return to the clearing the following night. The atmosphere was heavy with tension, and every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own, as if the forest was watching his every step. When he reached the clearing, the hooded figures were already there, moving in a hypnotic rhythm around the stones. This time he saw their faces. They were people who had disappeared, their eyes reflecting deep despair and a madness that seemed endless. The central figure stood out among them, revealing herself as the woman from the vision, her eyes burning with supernatural intensity. "You came to complete the cycle," she whispered, her voice resonating like an echo through the trees. She extended the knife to Ethan, and he felt an icy chill pierce his body, as if his very soul was being pulled into an abyss of darkness. The visions returned with full force, showing a time when those rituals were performed to keep the forest alive, a dark pact between the living and the dead. Ethan found himself participating in these rituals, his hands stained with blood, his mind torn between terror and acceptance. The clearing pulsed with an ancient energy, and Ethan realized he had crossed a boundary, that he now belonged to that dark world. With a final effort of will, he managed to break free from the trance, fleeing the clearing as the figures vanished into the shadows, their voices whispering promises of an inevitable return. Upon reaching the camp, Ethan was exhausted and in shock. Unable to fully process what had happened, he collapsed in his tent, falling asleep immediately due to physical and emotional exhaustion. Ethan woke up alone in the camp, his mind foggy with fragmented memories and inexplicable marks on his arms. The absence of Lucas was a hard blow. Initially, he thought Lucas might have gone exploring on his own, but as the hours passed and he did not return, concern turned to panic. The echoes of laughter and conversations between the two friends now seemed like a distant ghost. The forest, silent and imposing, seemed to have claimed another victim, and Ethan knew he had only escaped by a whim of fate, or maybe because he was spared to tell the story. Consumed by guilt and loyalty to Lucas, Ethan decided to embark on a solitary search through the forest, facing his fears. The suffocating atmosphere and invisible whispers challenged his courage with every step. During his desperate search, Ethan began having disturbing visions of Lucas in danger, visions that urged him to continue despite the growing terror. He wondered if these visions were real or just manifestations of his guilt and fear. During his search, Ethan found a clue, a piece of Lucas's coat caught on a branch, that suggested Lucas might have been drawn or taken by the hooded figures seen on that dreadful night. This discovery only deepened the mystery and horror of the situation, leaving Ethan with a terrifying understanding of the hidden power that inhabited the forest. Upon returning to the city, he struggled to process what he had experienced. The visions and whispers continued to haunt him, invading his dreams and overshadowing his reality. He began writing compulsively, trying to capture the horror he had witnessed, but knowing that some things should never be revealed. The fear that the forest would call him back never left him, and he found himself trapped in an endless cycle of wakefulness and nightmares. What do you think happened to Lucas? And Ethan, will he be able to escape the clutches of what he encountered? Leave your comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more horror stories like this one. Until next time, and remember, some forests should be left alone. Never underestimate the power of the unknown, for it may be waiting to claim those who dare to challenge it.